Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's safe and healthy during these unprecedented times. Thanks for joining us for today's event at Perry Worldhouse, the University of Pennsylvania's Global Affairs think tank. My name is Michael Horowitz, and I'm Richard Perry Professor and Director of Perry Worldhouse. I'll do my formal introduction in a moment, but before I begin, a few logistical notes. First, following the conversation, we will open the discussion up to questions that have been received from the audience. Second, to ask a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom interface in the middle. 3, you will also see a chat button. Please save the chat area for any technical or logistical issues, but also take a look at it because we're also going to drop resources and links throughout today's event into the chat. Fourth and finally, please keep it clean and safe for work in the chat and the Q&A, which will help us have a successful event. Welcome to today's event on networking in the world. I hope everyone is doing well, and thank you all for joining us today. Today's guest is Ambassador Capricia Marshall. Ambassador Marshall is a Perry Worldhouse Visiting Fellow and President of Global Engagement Strategies, LLC, which advises international, public, and private clients on issues related to the nexus of business and cultural diplomacy. She's also Ambassador in Residence at the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C. She's the author of the recently published book, Protocol: The Power of Diplomacy and How to Make It Work for You. She served as White House Social Secretary in the Clinton administration and United States Chief of Protocol in the Obama administration from 2009 to 2013. In her posts, she's done a number of things to try to move America forward and enhance relationships between dignitaries and industry leaders around the world. And I should add, she's not just a Perry Worldhouse Visiting Fellow, but also a Penn parent. So Ambassador Marshall, it's an honor to have you here with us at Perry Worldhouse, and thank you for joining us for this important conversation.
Well, thank you, Michael. It's an absolute pleasure to be back at Perry Worldhouse. And I also want to say thank you to Julia and Christian and Lisa, and especially my dear friend, John Gantz, for today. And also, of course, to Richard Perry. I'm sort of glancing to the left here because my Penn son, your Penn student, is standing just over there watching. He was sitting here behind me, and I don't know why, but he decided not to be on camera when we were live.
Seems very reasonable.
Right.
Well, to start out, maybe tell us a little bit about you. How did you get on the path to be an expert on diplomatic protocol? Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit? And especially since there are probably a lot of students attending who are thinking about, what they're going to do, after college, and who have interests in U.S. foreign policy and diplomacy.
I always appreciated when people's stories were shared with me when I was an undergraduate and then a graduate student as well, because it helped, open up new ideas and perhaps a position that I had absolutely no idea about. And I would have to say that Chief of Protocol was one I did not learn about until I was actually in the government itself. Let me dial back and give you a bit more why I feel like I was so suited for this position of Chief of Protocol. I'm a first generation American. My mother from Mexico, my father from former Yugoslavia of Croatian descent. And I grew up in a house that was like a mini UN. We lived with my grandmother, my mother's mother, and so many different languages were spoken. So many different types of food were served. We not only had the flavors of Mexico and Croatia, but Poland and Italy from other family members and the neighbors.
Hold on, Ambassador Marshall, you're just making me hungry now.
Sorry about that, but it was really wonderful. And it sat at the core of who I am. And so when I was offered this extraordinary position of Chief of Protocol by President Obama, he put my name up before the Senate. I received it, and I was sworn in. I felt like I was returning home to my grandmother's kitchen. I got to shine a wonderful spotlight on the cultural differences of others, on who they are, where they hail from, and why it's important really to know those differences, how it can be empowering for those at the highest levels of government to know of those unique and special differences. As you noted in your introduction, Michael, I've had a few jobs in government. I started off, and I would suggest to anyone that if you're interested in going into any type of public service, that you begin with an internship. Interning in the government, especially the government that's about to start. I'm very excited. So happy for President-elect Joe Biden. And there's going to be great opportunities in all of the agencies. You get a ton of responsibility. I did that early on and learned a lot about Washington, D.C. and knew that I wanted to return. And then, of course, I went out on a campaign with Bill Clinton when he became president, and started off at a lower level job and then worked my way up to become social secretary, and then realized there was this other job, chief of protocol, across Pennsylvania Avenue, and made my sights for that if I was ever offered that opportunity again. And when I was, boy, I grabbed onto it and went for it.
Sorry. Wow. Rookie mistake by me. So tell us a little bit about the job itself. What does it mean to be the chief of protocol for the United States? And, how did that inspire you to write a whole book about it?
Well, I have to start with my last day in the position. President Obama, just the absolute best. I mean, wonderful, wonderful person to work for. What a great boss. When I told him that I really had to think about stepping down, he said to me time and again, "No, Capricia, you got to stay. No, we'll make it figure out. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. Come on." And that made me feel really good. But I had a 13-year-old son, now 20, and at the time, and realized I had to be spending a bit more time at home because the job does entail a lot of travel. And I sobbed uncontrollably on that last day. My son and my husband with me in the Oval Office. It was embarrassing because I really didn't want to leave the job. It's a wonderful, wonderful position. When I did, and I stepped out into the private sector, I realized that people in business, individuals in their private lives, they were having a hard time making those critical connections with one another and forging new relationships that would help them achieve their end goal. And I thought, boy, all the lessons that I've learned, all the tools that I developed throughout my 12 years in government, this is what I did. In protocol, what we did was we created a foundation for diplomacy, and so many different aspects in the Office of Protocol were utilized to achieve that goal. In the Office of Visits, it's all about welcoming visitors, presidents, prime ministers, kings and queens to the United States. One of my favorite duties was actually standing plain side at the bottom of a staircase and stretching out my hand and welcoming a visiting dignitary and stating on behalf of President Obama, "Welcome to the United States." It gives me a little bit of a chill even saying it now, but it's ever so important because that sets the tone for the rest of that visit. I also traveled with the president all over the world. Pretty fantastic. Attached to his side when he would go to dinners or events or summits, to be there as his advisor on any particular issues that would arise, cultural, protocol, events oriented, whatever it was, I was there to give him that critical advice. We had a ceremonials division that's all the pomp and circumstance, the state visits, the wonderful events that took place for the Secretary of State for Hillary Clinton, my great mentor at the State Department. And as well, we oversaw the President's Guest House, Blair House. And in addition to that, one aspect of the job that I was really unaware of until I was in the post itself was how we oversaw the Foreign Diplomatic Corps, from the credentialing to when they first arrived to our country, they present their papers to the president as the official representative of their government, all the way through their term, making sure that everything goes well for them, that they're creating those bridges of understanding between their country and ours. And then sometimes when there's some troubles that arise also, like perhaps a son or daughter that gets into a little scuffle with a car accident or something like that, we have to jump in and assist with those matters as well. So the job really has a whole bunch of facets to it. Exciting, interesting, and I loved every minute of it.
All right. So that was That was a great answer and a very positive spin, but tell us a story about maybe a day when things didn't go well.
Ooh,
Like what's an example of maybe maybe a mishap that, maybe made the news, maybe didn't make the news that, illustrates the kind of challenges that you had to deal with.
Yeah. So there are a few, I should say. And thank goodness I don't mind making fun of myself every now and again. And as well, my son really enjoys making fun of me. So I'll give you a quick one first and then a lengthier one that could have had some pretty hard consequences attached to it. The first one was when it was for the state visit of President Calderon of Mexico. And like I said, I'm half Mexican. And at the state dinner, part of my position is part of the job, the role is to walk in front of the president and the first lady out onto the North Portico and wait the arrival of, and then greet the foreign dignitary and spouse and introduce them again very formally to the president and the first lady. And we're all in gowns and everyone's very fancied up. And so I went to go take my position on the North Portico, which is slightly to the left. And as I began to make my descent, my skinny, very thin, regrettably, Manolo Blahnik heels got stuck in a divot in the marble. You can Google it, and down I went. Now, thank goodness I didn't face plant or anything like that, but I kind of gave a little bit of a jump and I do a little P90X. So I had a pretty good core, pulled myself back up again. And meanwhile, the president is, like trying to reach for me. And Mrs. Obama, thank goodness, is yelling out, "Don't take the picture." I'm blinded, of course, by the flash bulbs that are going off by the International Press Corps, of which there's about 100 across from us. I thought to
I
myself,
mean, this
okay,
this is reminding me of Jennifer Lawrence at the Oscars or something.
yes,
Like,
yes, but she's so pretty and so elegant. And so I realized, I said, okay, what do we do? Carry on. And so I clenched my toes onto my shoes and made my way down the steps, greeted President Calderon, who had no idea that this had all just happened, escorted him back up, made the introductions, got inside, and the president goes, "Capricia, are you okay?" I said, yeah, I think so. He's like, "Okay, are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think so. Just a bruised ego." Meanwhile, my parents back in Cleveland, because every Mexican in my family is watching this, right? Every relation, every one of my member of my family, they're all watching this. And they call, they're like, "Did she have a heart attack? Did she have a stroke? What happened? What happened?" But we flash forward to the next visit, which was for the president of Korea, President Lee Myung-bak. I'm about to walk out and I'm standing in front of President Obama and Mrs. Obama again, and he leans in really close to my neck and he goes, "Will she stay up or will she go down?" And meanwhile, Michelle's yelling, "Barack, leave her alone. Don't do that. Don't do that." Thank goodness I stayed up. Although my son did find this one site where it has me to music going down and up, down and up. It was the gift that just kept on giving. It was a wonderful moment. But I'll tell you very quickly, Michael, there was another oopsie doodle, and you have to take these, you have to embrace them. And they're, of course, teaching lessons. Although I think in this instance, I could have been fired. This was at the, exactly, at the UN General Assembly. And the UN General Assembly is this gauntlet that you go through. It is a diplomatic, just, days of bilats, multilats, just back and forth, back and forth. And it's exhausting. Every night I'm getting maybe 2 to 3 hours of sleep. It was just a crazy, crazy time period. Well, President Obama thought he could challenge us a bit more and also put in there the Asean Summit, a summit, a gathering of leaders from the region. And so our team was really, really taxed. We're working hard. We're trying to put everything together. And we made one small error in that we delegated our flag duties away to someone who was known part of the advance team. And so the event, I'm lining the leaders up. I do the introductions. They go out and take their place in front of their flags. We are now moving on to the next event. We're thinking everything's going okay. So all of a sudden, one of the team members comes up to me. She rushes up to me. She goes, "Capricia, we have a huge problem." I'm like, "What is it?" And she's never flustered. And she goes, "The flag for the Philippines was hung inappropriately." I'm like, now flags That's a country symbol. It's a huge, huge, huge deal, particularly in diplomacy. And so I was like, oh no, okay, we got to go fix it. She goes, no, that's not all. She said, the other thing is that it was flagged in a way that conveys that the Philippines is at war. I'm like, oh no, oh, this is okay, a double hit. The triple hit was about to happen. So she dashes off to go fix it. I see now the NSC barreling at me with the ambassador of the Philippines at their side, and they come up to me. They're like, "We have a problem." I said, "We've already started to fix it." Or immediately, as I advise in my book, make your apologies immediate and direct. And I profusely apologized, completely accepted all of the blame, of course, myself as the head of our bureau, and then the NSC advisor told me, and to top it off, the President Obama was about to ask President Aquino for a pull aside and to ask him a favor. So I had to put a written statement out. We had to submit it all. And then I had to really face the music. When President Obama got off the stage at the plenary, he came up, I walked up to him and I was like, sir, and he was looking like he's very tall. He's looking down at me. And I said, sir, and I explained what had happened and what we had done. And he's like, well, thank you so very much for fixing it, for doing everything that you did. Now I'm going to ask you, Capricia, this isn't going to happen again, right? And I said, no, sir, it certainly won't. And thank goodness it never did.
Wow, that that is incredible. And for those listening that may not know this, President Calderon from Mexico was actually a distinguished leader in residence at Perry Worldhouse a few years ago. And so, and we've dropped a link into the chat describing him and him in some of his visit. And here's a question that gets into building on your point about the flag. How does you prepare a room for an important event? Like say when President Obama was going to meet with, say, President Putin, or I guess at that point, was he president, or was that during that brief time when he had stepped?
No. There's actually there's another illustrative story here, Michael.
I love it.
So I talk about soft power tools in the book, and in particular, one of the most important to embrace is, and let me just quickly state that soft power, I think that probably everybody in the audience knows this, but contrary to hard, which is go to war, economic sanctions, soft power is about, it was a term coined by Joseph Nye. It's about the law of attraction. How do I bring people into my way of thinking? How do I line them up into a way that this diplomatic endeavor that I'm stepping into will be successful? And one of those in protocol that we use time and time again is the power of place. And then also, how do we arrange or rig a room, if you will, so that it really works in our president's favor. And so for the G20, we traveled down to Mexico, and this was the first visit that President Obama was going to have with then or now President Putin. He had just become president. Elections had just happened. And so it's a pretty important visit. It's a really important bilateral. And so a lot of tension. I went and met with the head of the NSC to discuss what are the goals, what are we trying to achieve, because that really came into play as to what kind of room we would find, what would we do with the room, all of those. And they basically said, what we're trying to do is pull Putin into our way, or closer into our way of thinking. We have to create a collaborative relationship if this is going to work. And so we went about finding a room, and we found one that was small because we did want him to feel forced into making some decisions. The ceiling height was a little lower, which was helpful because that forces you into more concrete decisions, as science says. And then we had to warm up the room. We still wanted it to feel welcoming, so we had to work on lighting because the Secret Service blocks out all the windows with their draping. And we found a very thin table, again, to bring the leaders closer together, but we put some greenery around it so that, again, it felt welcoming and inviting. And then the moment came where he was supposed to arrive. Well, he was late. It's a little bit of mindset diplomacy on his part. He was basically saying, I'm in charge here. And, minutes started to tick by. I looked at my counterpart who's standing there. I'm like, and he's like, I don't know. And he, sweat's kind of drooling down his face. And so he's quite nervous. And finally, President Putin arrives. I welcome, hello, let me escort you. So I escort him then to where President Obama is and make the introductions. Well, President Obama is really tall. What we had learned just before this meeting was that President Putin was really hoping not to see Secretary Clinton. Why? Because she had been, let's say, not very favorable about the election results of his recent election in Russia. So President Obama is standing there, and then he sort of engaged in a bit of mindset diplomacy. And after he shook hands, he stepped aside and he unveiled there standing Secretary Clinton. And you saw for just a moment a hint of surprise in President Putin's face. That was great. So walking into this meeting, a little taken off guard. They got into the meeting about 2 hours later. After they had finished, I connected back up with the NSC advisor and I asked, so how did it go? And he said, it went actually as well as we could be expected on issues like Syria, that we created, we lessened the gap, if you will, between us, that we got a bit closer on these issues. So it was, in our mind, we set the right roadmap, we set the right staging for this engagement.
I want to ask a follow-up on that, actually. The point you made about how Putin didn't want to see Secretary Clinton. How does that kind of information get to you when you're sort of chief of protocol? How do you sort of find that out and then make a call or not about how to handle it?
Well, it comes through in a variety of ways. What I found, the greatest success that I had as in that position was to create as many avenues of information as I possibly could, whether it was in our own government with all of the critical people who are also engaging in discussions with our counterparts, as well with our embassy. The folks there, they're the best of the best, and they know so much information and are happy to assist in these diplomatic engagements, but then also with the foreign embassy as well, with my personal counterparts. I created this wonderful conference called it was the Global Chiefs of Protocol Conference, so we can really get to know one another. We could trust one another and learn from one another, exchange ideas. All of those relationships help so much, and building that network really helped me to make sure that I was providing the best circumstances, the best environment for diplomacy to take place on behalf of the president and the Secretary of State. So you hear that, when you keep calling and you keep emailing or texting or WhatsApping, you get bits of information along the way from a variety of different people when they're like, well, is the delegation going to be this? And you're like, no, it's going to be that. And they're like, I thought it was going to be this. So you just learn little bits of information along the way.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the role of gender in diplomacy and sort of the protocol diplomacy. We're in a world where fortunately we have more female leaders, and hopefully we'll have even more around the world over the next generation. And in that you can have, combined with cultural differences, maybe between the United States and other countries, if there are countries where, say, leaders have multiple spouses, what does that mean from a protocol perspective? Say when you're dealing with a female leader and maybe a first guy versus vice versa, and were there ever any incidents surrounding those kinds of challenges as women around the world, break through varieties of glass ceilings and assume leadership roles?
Well, didn't we just break through one of the big ones here in the United States?
I was kind of hoping you were going to mention that. So good. Thank you.
Well, I'm incredibly excited for Vice President-elect Kamala Harris to take the oath of office. It is about time. There have been many women before her who have attempted to crash right through, and she has done it brilliantly. And I know that she will be a tremendous success and an amazing asset to the president-elect, to President soon to be Biden. But yes, women are, I actually wrote an entire chapter on negotiating while female, because diplomacy and all the tools that I discuss in this book, they apply to everyone, of course, but there's a particular application. You raise a few of those, Mike, is that women need to take care of. Women are always in a state of negotiation and just about everything that they do, and they're always trying to bridge and influence in our male dominated world, because it really is. And you realize this much more so when you travel in particular parts of the globe. I mean, when you're in New Zealand, you feel right at home with Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's environment. But there are regions of the world where it is certainly more difficult. And you do raise a quandary that we had once, was when a leader actually had multiple wives, and we weren't quite sure which one was the spouse per se, and who was supposed to reflect the counterpart to Mrs. Obama. And in those instances, you always lean into the visitor, and you just ask those very direct, very explicit questions, and they're happy to make sure that they are providing you the right information, because of course they want their government to be reflected well. But what I have said to women throughout my career, and the wonderful young women that I've had the opportunity to mentor, is, raise your personal, your cultural gender IQ. Know more about that place that you're visiting. What are their expectations? What are their habits? There are particular places that men of perhaps a religious sect will not touch a woman. They usually will indicate by crossing their arms over their chest, and that will indicate, I politely want to tell you I cannot touch your hand, but I'm so pleased to meet you. It is a sign of welcome. Mrs. Obama actually ran into that when we were in Indonesia, and we were visiting. It was an amazing visit, because they were so excited to have President Obama and Mrs. Obama there. It was like the founding son returns home. They were just so excited. And at this welcoming, where I would introduce our president and first lady to various members of the delegation, it was never discussed. It was never indicated that there was one member of their welcoming party who did not touch women. And at the time when the introductions were taking place, and we are well briefed in this, we make sure, and Mrs. Obama, she's amazing at doing her homework and making sure that she never made any errors of this sort to deviate from the work at hand. So went through, shook his hand. It was later that we got this because apparently the media was abuzz in Indonesia that this senator had touched Mrs. Obama's hand, and or this politician had touched Mrs. Obama, and he doesn't, he's of the sect that does not. And so we're like, wait a minute, we were never informed of that, and B, she always pauses and waits, which I do suggest to women. Give it a bit of a hiccup, a moment, and see if that gentleman reaches his hand out first. Then you return the shake, and then you're never creating an uncomfortable moment, and particularly in countries where this issue might arise. Well, we went to tape, and we did see that he reached out very vigorously, grabbed her hand, and boy, he shook it. Exactly. So we were like, sorry, guy, this is all on you, and you're going to have to explain it to your many, many followers.
So I want to shift now into questions from the audience. We have a lot of questions coming in, and first one up is from a student who says, as a first-generation American like yourself and a first-generation college student interested in diplomacy, I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome and getting over the initial discomfort of networking, especially when it comes to political or diplomatic contexts. How do you get over that apprehension and sort of make those kinds of connections when you're just starting out?
Oh boy, I know that feeling so well. I really, really do. It's hard. It's hard to sort of push that feeling down in your belly when you just are a little anxious about it. It's not comfortable to you. It's not the environment you grew up in. I had a great, beautiful family, a big family, but we all sort of huddled together and we stayed within our own. And my suggestions are, first, dive deep into where your interests are. When you have clubs, organizations that you can become a part of, that the topic feels comfortable, whether it might be something just on politics, basics on politics, and get to know people and slowly build up your network. I would say veer a little bit away from social media and engaging there. It can be harsh. It can be a tough hurdle. The face-to-face, nothing replaces it. I mean, I'm so sad I can't be at Perry World House in person right now. I'd love to see everyone in person, but it is this new reality that we're living in. But the face-to-face, when you are together with people, whether it's in this virtual world or it's in person, is so much better than the social media environment. And you begin to then make those interesting connections with people, and one leads to the next, and it leads to the next. You create this sort of chain. So I first suggest lean into those special interests that you have, and I know at Penn there are so many different clubs and organizations that offer multiple opportunities for you to create this new network. And also you have great faculty there. They're always full of tremendous suggestions. Go to places and talks like at Perry World House. You'll meet amazing people there and do that follow-up. What's really important is don't make that initial connection and then not follow up. Make sure that you're doing the follow-up. Take the card, take someone's number, whatever it might be, email, and do the follow-up. And I think you're going to be surprised, because once you start to build it, you're going to want more and more, and it will come.
So that's a great answer. Now let me follow up with a question that builds on that comes from one of our guests who, and I'm going to add something on the end to it. And so what they asked is, what does proper diplomatic protocol look like on Zoom? How do heads of state meet now? And the thing I would add on that, maybe from more of a student early career perspective, is how would you recommend doing that kind of networking and that kind of reaching out in this virtual world that we're in, hopefully not forever, as opposed to when in-person meetings were more possible.
Yeah. So let me start with the latter half of your question first here, Mike. I think it is a tough new platform to navigate. There's multiple platforms, but this whole just virtual space is interesting and challenging for us to navigate. But it is presenting amazing opportunities that we could not have. If you have an interest in African studies, you can now start joining Zooms that are connecting you directly, because people have to create them, with people in Africa. And you're beginning to have these one-on-one discussions with people. Webinars are a bit more difficult to, of course, navigate, because you get a little blocked out of being an audience member. But when they're open, or you via the chat, like many people are doing right now, Q&A, you can make those connections, sending your information back and forth to one another. So even though we're now, it feels as though we're limited, I have found that there are way many opportunities, and that now I can access conversations and discussions that before I would have had to have traveled to New York for, or even downtown Washington. It would have conflicted with another part of my schedule. I now can sit and watch a variety of events, or I can engage in those events, allowing me then to meet more and new interesting people. So look out for, do some research, again, on topics that are of interest to you, and you're going to be incredibly surprised at the number of different types of Zooms that pop up, offering you the ability to dive a little bit deeper and broader into your areas of interest. As far as leaders around the world, we just had a G20. It was odd to watch. I mean, you can watch. Regrettably, our president didn't fully participate in it, but and the opportunities that they have in these plenary sessions and a variety of the sessions that are normally actually not accessible, we got to see a little bit more of it than it would have just come through press coverage. There were parts of it that you could actually see live, and I enjoyed that, but there is nothing that can, as I stated, replace the person-to-person. Leaders need to feel one another. They need to look each other in the eye when they're asking them to bridge an issue or come onto their side of a debate. There's just there's that emotional personal need to see the affirmation in their eyes when they're making that request. So I'm certainly hopeful that you're right, Mike, that we're going to be returning back to these times of when we're back in person again, with a little mix of the virtual, offering us some more opportunities that but for we wouldn't have been able to have.
I think it's a great point. In some ways, the way that virtual encounters don't, there's almost a little bit of a stigma to participating virtually, like it was less than, I think, in some ways previously. And getting beyond that, it, in some ways, creates opportunities for more inclusiveness in people that participate in things, and opportunities for greater participation.
Right.
So
Yes.
here, let me ask a question about, you've referenced President Trump a couple of times in this context, and let me go there and ask a question about the personalization of diplomacy in some ways in this administration. And that one of the things, as somebody who studies foreign policy, but is a bit of an outsider in many ways, one of the things that it looks like is that you have that diplomacy in this particular White House has been concentrated more in the individual of the president, as opposed to the bureaucracy in some ways. And bureaucracy, I don't necessarily mean career civil servants. I mean, political appointees, others, et cetera. What do you think that has meant for the United States? And how do you expect that might shift in a Biden-Harris administration?
Well, every president, and what I find one of the most extraordinary moments is when a president takes the position on after the swearing in. All former presidents join that president, and to say him because we haven't had a female president yet, but join him in the Oval Office and begin to download their experiences and discuss some of the lessons that they had learned and the hurdles that are about to be presented to them, and really having this wonderful sharing experience. What it always stated to me is that this is the office of the president. You are privileged to step into the presidency as whether you're George Bush, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, whoever you are, whomever that person is, they have had the great privilege of stepping into the presidency. It is about the presidency. It's about the United States. It's about our country. It is not about the person. That person has the opportunity, has the great privilege, has the honor of holding those reins and steering our country in the right direction. It should never be about the person. It always must be about the greater interests of our country. And so when it does devolve into personal attacks or personal a personal agenda, we're doing a great disservice to the foreign policy goals of our country. And where previous presidents have put us on steadfast footing, we're now a little shaky. And I think we've seen that in our country, that we're shaky right now. I have had the great privilege of working with President-elect, getting the title right, President-elect Biden, when he served as vice president. He's someone who always wanted to be fully informed. He wanted to know all of the information before he engaged with his counterpart, and then would walk into a room and just sort of a burst of energy, greeting them warmly bringing them in, because he knew all that was so, so very important about this relationship, about defining that moment, what he was trying to seek, the ultimate goal, using all the information I just gave him, but then also creating that great, warm and welcoming environment. It wasn't about him. He knew and always knew that it was about the ultimate goal in that engagement, in that bilateral, in that multilateral, whatever it ended up being. And it hasn't ever been about him. It was about serving the people of Delaware. It's about serving his country. It is that service to nation that is, I think, uniquely different about President-elect Biden.
So the next question from our audience asks you maybe if you'll dish a little bit on some other countries. And the question asks, are there some countries who are particularly well known for being skilled in protocol or unskilled? Have you experienced this? And how does that then contribute to, how did that contribute to their ability to achieve diplomatic and foreign policy goals?
Well, I will tell you about the skill. There are those that were not as skilled, but
you're very diplomatic.
Yes, zip the lip on those. But what we in protocol, I embraced was that I stepped in to help. There was one country I went to, I was with President Obama and visiting, and we landed, and it was super, super late at night. And no matter what, I mean, I had to be ready to go. So, before we would land, I had to race into the restroom at Air Force One, change into a suit, get my hair done, and as a woman, put my makeup on and everything, and then be prepared to go with him to that first event. And I was with him no matter how long and late he went, and I had got up and I was with him first thing in the morning. And on this one occasion, he was having a discussion at the head of that country's palace, if you will, and it's not royalty, so that's not giving away a hint. The chief of protocol, my counterpart, young man, wonderful, asked me to please step into a conference room and talk about the welcoming ceremony the next day. And those ceremonies are very, very important. You're fully on stage, your country, your leader, everyone. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? I'm like, it's the night before. What do you mean? And so together we sat down and we crafted out his welcoming ceremony that he then sent on to the team, made it very basic and simple, but the elements that needed to be a part of it. So, there are those moments, but those who are incredibly skilled at protocol, I would have to say first and foremost are the Chinese. They adhere to very strict protocol and make sure that they're following those details just so. We walk through the details. It's incredibly important to create a strong relationship with them at the get-go. And I was lucky to have done that with my counterpart early on and with his entire team when President Obama traveled to China for a state visit at the invitation of President Hu Jintao. And there we actually encountered something quite interesting. When President Obama was at the first night dinner, and we were all huddled in the back room, and it's at the Diu Tai, which is the sort of the Chinese president's Camp David, if you will. I get this like immediate request from my counterpart. He's like, comes over to me and he's just like, Ambassador Marshall, because my president has a urgent request for President Obama. And I thought, well, this is so odd. Literally every detail of every moment has been mapped out and we've walked through it. How could they have something that I thought this has to be really, really important if it's so last minute? And then he leaned in and he goes, President Hu would like President Obama to make a noodle. I was like, a noodle. And he explained to me why it was important and how they were going to do it. And I determined, you know what, this is important. And this is a part of this relationship building. And so I told the other people, a part of our delegation, they're like, okay, if you think it's important, you go tell them. And so I had to walk over to President Obama, whisper in his ear, Mr. President, President Hu would like you to make a noodle. And he kind of gave me, we're just getting to know one another. This is really early on in our relationship. And he's like, what?
Was he like, are you messing with me? Or was he like...
Yeah, Mike, it was just like that. The look was like, crazy lady on the alert here. And, but he didn't say anything. I explained to him why and how, and he's like, okay, let's make a noodle. And he stood up, stood shoulder to shoulder with President Hu, and they bounced this wad of dough until it created this really long noodle. And what it symbolized and what was so important for the Chinese was the longevity of this relationship. We're starting here, but look at how long and far this will go. And President Obama, in choosing to lean into this ritual and to this moment, put the relationship with President Hu Jintao on the right footing. And it was really super smart for him to have done that. And so phew on my part, because it all went off well. And I was invited back out on the plane again. But these moments are very, very important. And the Chinese understand that when they're executing protocol.
It sounds a little better than Trump and the orb, at the very least. All right, we've got another student question here for you. Hi, Ambassador Marshall. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences as a political science and economics student aspiring to serve the public after a few years in the private sector. What skills would you suggest students having goals like me to focus on developing through their academic studies and early professional career?
Oh my, I'd love to ask them what they were doing beforehand, just out of sheer curiosity and what brought them in. But I think there are quite a few things that you can focus on. I'm just going to say the thing that my son probably would give a little cringe to, but everybody.
He's right over there, right? So
he would cringe a little bit at is the etiquette. Etiquette is a cousin to protocol. It's about your social behavior and those expectations. Everyone can hone in on just refining, developing, in some people's instance, their basic etiquette tools. And because when you feel comfortable in an environment, the goals of that engagement just come forth. When you're seated at a table and you're not sure which fork to use or which glass to lift, or you're seeing and you're doing something, you're not focused on the issue at hand, what you're trying to do, the conversation. Perhaps this is an interview with a prospective employer and they've invited you to dinner. That happens a lot. And all of a sudden you're realizing, oh no, do I use this spoon, that fork, this glass? And you feel very sort of ill at ease. So just for everyone's sake, hone in on those. I talk quite a bit about that in the book. Learn some of the basics, how to give a toast, things of that sort can always come in handy. The other that I would say is in every job, I think in every career choice, when we are aware of our own cultural IQ, what do I admit? What do I say about myself when I meet somebody? As an American, as a person, what statement, what testament am I making when I first meet that person? We all have some presets that come with us from where we were raised, our religion, our beliefs, and being open to changing those presets, of expanding, of being curious in nature is really, really important. And then knowing the culture and differences, traditions of the person that I'm meeting, making sure that I'm well researched and preparing for whatever that engagement is, can be empowering. And it was for President Obama when I taught him, a specific gesture before he walked into a meeting. And he did it, if it was the namaste or whatever it might be, or a specific comment that he would make about this country, people that he's meeting. You could see instantly that respect, that moment of warmth that was shared between the two, and you lean into this sort of pivot in the relationship. That can be very empowering as well. It can be a wonderful tool to use. So there's that, but I talk about just, how to invest in relationships, why it's important to invest in these relationships, how to go about doing that in a variety of simple ways, from going to a very popular restaurant where people are meeting for breakfast and meeting a whole host of people that but for you may not have. Joining, as I said, organizations, clubs, can also be a way of networking. Building up your own personal network of individuals of interest, it just enhances the person that you are.
So we're covering a lot of ground here, and I want to switch now from a student question in some ways back to the substance of American diplomacy. And we have a question that just came in that said, "Hi, Ambassador Marshall. How does the turbulent presidential election and I'm just reading the question, not in the erosion of traditional U.S. soft power over the last 4 years affect the future diplomatic initiatives of a Biden-Harris administration? How can America regain credibility among its allies in the international community?"
Mm. This is a weighty problem that we are confronting in this administration. We have lost, many of us believe, a critical footing around the world. The advantage that we as American diplomats have had. First off, let me just say that there are so many empty postings, just jobs that are incredibly essential, that have not been filled in years. And I dare say in some instances we're left vacant on purpose to silo power and decision making into just a few critical roles. You need a lot of people to forge those important relationships that we must engage with around the world, and those positions are there for a reason. And so, I know already President-elect Biden has been setting forth. There are a couple of announcements. I think someone put one through in the chat that I was interested in seeing, putting forth the cabinet and getting those jobs filled ASAP. There's two extraordinary individuals whose names have been rumored to be announced tomorrow. Tony Blinken, a dear friend, and Jake Sullivan, both heading up the foreign policy team, and Linda Thompson Greenfield, an amazing career civil service officer who is going to be, hopefully, if the rumors are true, the next UN ambassador. These are people who understand the value of filling those positions, getting people to work, creating those bonds between the Foreign Service, the career civil service, and those political appointees, so that they can all have that same mission in serving our country in our foreign policy goals. They're hard workers. They're young, wonderful people, and they're not about individual agenda. So I'm thrilled at the possibility of this team setting forth in repairing the loss that we have endured over the past 4 years of those bonds that we had, and because we've either pulled out of trade agreements or decided not to engage in certain treaties, that we have lost those relationships. And in essence, we've lost our position of power. And so we want to regain, like I said, that footing again around the world. And we're going to have an extraordinary team in the people that President-elect Biden has put forth already. So
again, changing topics. We talked about, look, there are a lot of cool questions. I wish we could ask all of these. There are a lot of cool questions that have come in. Cool is maybe the wrong word. Interesting questions. We've talked about gender in diplomacy already. What about race? And specifically the thinking about systemic racism in the United States, the America's, I would say traditional role in trying and being a champion of freedom and democracy, and what must be in some cases an awkward interplay between those. How does it, in some ways, America's systemic racism influence than diplomacy, generate protocol questions, et cetera?
It is an awkward interplay. And uh, I think that we in the US felt as though for so many years we were woke, to use a term, um, and realized we were not. We were not. The hardships that people have endured, the silent hardships that people endured, are now sort of those layers are being lifted, are becoming glaringly more transparent, and we have to address it. I know we've been discussing on some of these conversations with the transition about how do we do this in these critical postings. And it's not just, oh, we have to place a few people of, certain backgrounds in high positions, as a cabinet level, but you have to make sure that throughout the appointments, exactly, Mike, throughout, that we are very, very aware that we are a truly diverse administration that is running our government, because we do know when you have diversity of opinion that sits around a table, you get better results. And so we have to proactively make sure that we are bringing in diverse candidates. They won't have the largest voice, and they probably won't have, the greatest mentors, the people who have been, heralding their resumes. So you have to seek them out and find them. The people who are right now just extraordinary individuals who are part of the HR team on President-elect Biden's transition are doing just that. They are looking for these real gems, people who will be representative of the United States. So when they're at all levels of our government, I think that we will start to see better decision-making and better results. I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful too. We've just got a couple minutes left, so let me take you out on a question about that we just got in about the future of protocol, that essentially asks, are there any traditions in diplomacy that you see as potentially outdated, and how do you see protocol evolving over the next decade or so, especially given some of the technological change that we could talk about, the shift to more virtual events in the context of the pandemic? What does the future hold for what protocol looks like?
Well, what is interesting is that this sort of loops us right back to the beginning of our discussion, is like, what does protocol do? And many people think it is a fancy, outdated bureau, and that probably just gets dusted off every now and again, and it really isn't. Protocol is the basics in our diplomatic endeavors. Like I said, it creates this foundation. We create a roadmap by which our president and secretary of state follow to make sure that they don't make those mistakes along the way. So in that sense, protocol will never change. That is forever has been and will continue to be the important plan, the important aspect of our diplomatic engagements that will stay in place. Some of the traditions, perhaps handshakes, of course, for the near future, will go much more to maybe even elbow bump, or just maybe everyone will start to adopt the namaste, right? And then we'll probably see quite a few more virtual engagements. I don't think that this pandemic is the last that we shall see. I think that we're just preparing for more yet to come, and we're an adaptable society. We can figure things out, and the lessons that we've learned in the past 8-9 months, we'll be applying them again in a different way for the future. And so these virtual gatherings will probably become something that's more of a staple than a one-off. I think that in that context, protocol, those basics, they will stand firm. How we apply them, they will have some variation.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Marshall, for those insights. It's a real honor to have you back at Perry Worldhouse and to have you here as a visiting fellow with us. And I can't wait until we can have you here in person again.
Oh,
And
thank you.
And thanks to our audience for joining us. We hope to see you tomorrow for a discussion on cities and international relations titled Bristol and Beyond, a Mayor on the World Stage, featuring Marvin Rees, the Mayor of Bristol, and for our future events. More information and links to register are in the chat. And as always, you can access a recording of this conversation on our YouTube page. You can follow us on social media, on Instagram and Twitter at Perry Worldhouse. And I hope everyone will join me in thanking Ambassador Marshall again, not only a Perry Worldhouse visiting fellow and a very distinguished diplomat, but also a pen parent for a fantastic event. So thank you again, Ambassador.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to join you, Mike, and Perry Worldhouse.
Have a great day, everybody.